Hey guys, what's up? It is week 474. Let's just jump right into the reviews. The first one up is from Red Shirt Pictures, also like a subsidiary of Synapse Films. And I have still some of the shrink wrap on here. And this is their newest release, and Hunter's Blood, 1986 Hicksploitation survival horror classic here. You got Bruce Glover right there on the cover. And my only complaint about this release, I love this movie, is that it's a little sun-faded. Maybe I'll pull out, do I have that on VHS? I definitely have it on a Laserdisc somewhere. I'll show it in the thing here. But Hunter's Blood, man, this skipped DVD and Blu-ray and went straight to 4K, which I'm very happy for. Red Shirt Pictures is doing miracles. We're getting Fright Night 2. We're going to get the Prom Night movies. Well, I already had one, but we're getting 2, 3, and 4. So, yeah, they're doing a lot of cool releases. They had already put out Trick or Treat. So, besides that, yeah, this one is a pretty fun Hicksploitation movie that Roger Corman ended up distributing back in the day. And it's really kind of been lost on the VHS, cable kind of Laserdisc kind of circuit forever. But I think that anybody that's actually seen the movie pretty much always had a positive opinion of Hunter's Blood. I mean, as far as horror fans are concerned, this was actually based off a book, which I also have somewhere. I haven't ever actually got to read the damn thing. I started to, I never finished it, but maybe I'll pull that out and show you guys too. Obviously, you can tell I am a Hunter's Blood fan. So, obviously a take on Deliverance, right? Hicksploitation. After 72, you got like 71, 72, 70, Deliverance, and then Texas Chainsaw. Hicksploitation was pretty big. But before that, it was around as well. Just one of my kind of favorite subgenres, these kind of deals. And I wouldn't really necessarily call Deliverance a horror film, but what it kind of spawned were definitely kind of horror films like Rituals and this. So what we have here is your classic kind of story here. 5 city slickers, right? And they're going to go hunting, deer hunting. 4 old friends. It's 2 brothers, a best friend, and the best friend's kid. And a new guy that the one of the brothers brings because he's a lawyer, and he's a lawyer friend of his. Sam Bottoms is the main guy. From the family that also, has Joseph Bottoms and Timothy Bottoms in here. Sam Bottoms died pretty young, unfortunately, tragically. But he was in Outlaw Josie Wales in The Last Picture Show, along with his brother Tim Bottoms. But it also has Clu Gulager, horror icon here, also in The Last Picture Show, but he's in Return of the Living Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 the year before, and The Initiation in 84. Clu Gulager is pretty much a cult actor, fan favorite. Also has Joey Travolta in here as the kind of tag-along kind of character who's John Travolta's brother. I can't think of the guy who plays Big Al and Ralph, but they're familiar character actors that you recognize and do a good job. I think Al's a particularly good character. But, of course, they run into some poachers led by the guy who plays Sal in RoboCop. And he's also in Coffee. He's in a bunch of stuff. Good actor. I never remember this guy's name, unfortunately. Also, amongst the Hicks or Rednecks or whatever you will, include Billy Drago, Mickey Jones, Bruce Glover. So you got a nice little group there of these poachers out there that function as actually a family, and they're all very standout characters in their own outfits, which they do mention in the commentary. Michael Felsher points out that was a very good idea, to have these characters stand out. So many times you watch these movies and the bad guys don't stand out. And these characters definitely need to stand out when you're going to deal with like kind of a gang, like something like the Beast or I Spit in a Grave. They all kind of, but they're so ruthless you remember them. But these characters definitely stand out. Class 84, something like that. But yeah, these characters are wonderful. So they run into him, and they have, some words. At first, they have this great little kind of classic kind of bar kind of scene where you actually see Charles Cyphers pop up in here, which it's the first time I realized that was Charles Cyphers from Halloween and Death Wish 2 and The Fog. But he plays one of the a hillbilly as well. Also, you'll see a small role, Billy Bob Thornton's first speaking role in here. So in that bar scene. But basically, they run afoul of these rednecks when they're out there poaching. They come across some rangers, and they think everything is kind of tied up, but these poachers decide to kind of escape and decide they got to kill these guys if they want to get away with what they were doing and what they have done. So it's kind of a game of survival. Some people get killed, and it's up to kind of Sam Bottoms to stand up against these guys. Sam Bottoms is really good in here. It looks like he's doing a lot of his own stunts, jumping around, flying around. It's pretty intense, pretty crazy stuff. When you think that a lot of the people are definitely doing their own stunts. There's some fun car stunts in here as well. And then Clu Gulager is also fantastic as Mason, kind of the tough guy of the group. Just loses his temper, and some of the lines he has are actually wonderful in here. When he's like, "You're gonna," it's like Billy Drago's like, "I'll take on Grandpa," and he's like, the one line that Sal says to him, and he's like, "That was the boots versus oh, boots ain't what you're getting," and they just go at it. But Clu Gulager has always been one of my favorites ever since I first saw Return of the Living Dead. He always stood out to me, and Bert is probably my favorite character in Return of the Living Dead, and he's great in this as well. But this movie does stop and take the time to like have these kind of emotional kind of lines within the characters. Like there's scenes where characters are hurt, and Al, yells at Joey Travolta at one point, and he kind of is like, "I'm sorry, son," you know what I mean? It has this like nice speech, and it's like I feel like that's genuinely a nice little scene in here, a nice little moment that they actually spend the time and do that with. And the action's really solid, and it's incredibly violent. I think the violence is probably what pushes this over into the horror category. I think it's more of an action thriller first, and then a survival horror film afterwards, or exploitation, if you will, which kind of crosses both genres. But the violence is pretty harsh, especially a couple like show-stopping scenes, and they shoot them really effectively. They decide what to show and what not to show, which I think is great. But Bruce Glover, fantastic as One Eye, and there's a nice little special feature on here with him. Bruce Glover basically says, "I didn't want to do it unless I was the lead baddie, but they convinced me and told me I could basically create my own character." And that's kind of seems what happens is a lot of these actors kind of took the characters and made them, and they put a lot into it. I mean, there's so many familiar faces. Like Billy Drago is always going to be that kind of villainous character from stuff like The Untouchables and his great little role in Mysterious Skin. And Mickey Jones was a staple on television and Home Improvement and things like that. He's in Drop Zone, but it's just he was just in that China Lake short I watched. But these characters, they stand out to you, and even if you don't know a lot of their names, you always remember their faces. But yeah, there's a nice little twist at the end, and I love this movie. And there's a couple little small bits that stand out to me, like when they're running and trying to survive. You hear like the rednecks in the background, and you hear this laugh that's always played throughout the trailer, and you hear this weird kind of laugh and cackling, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. Stands out, makes it memorable. The score is also underrated. And they mentioned how they actually got the score, and it's actually done by somebody that's probably a little bit bigger than this budget should be, but it looked fantastic, sounded fantastic. It was a real treat to finally watch Hunter's Blood as it deserved to be seen. One of my last kind of favorite movies that's not a foreign film, one of my last favorite American kind of horror films that wasn't on release here. I still would love to see Friday Night 2, which is coming in Midnight Hour, and Nightlife, with Scott Grimes and Sean Astin. There's a couple out there that I'd really like to see, and there's a bunch of Hong Kong ones and stuff like that. But as far as American films are concerned, they're hitting up a lot of them, and I'm really happy to see that. But I'm not a huge fan of, like, it looks a little sun faded. I just think the print was better because it looks so much more rich on the back. But as far as the special features, we have exclusive limited edition slipcase featuring variant covers by Graham Humphreys and Sean Longmore, 4K restoration from the original 35 camera negative, mastered in Dolby Vision, HDR10 compatible, lossless English DTH HD master audio of the English 2.0 mono theatrical, and an all-new 5.1 sound mix. Very good sound mix there. Audio commentary with producer Meryl Schreiben, moderated by film historian Michael Felsher. Good commentary. And then we have a commentary with film historian, author Amanda Reyes, and genre critic J.A. Kurzweil. Love Amanda Reyes. Always does a fantastic job. So two really strong commentaries. The Woods Run Red, The Making of Hunter's Blood, featuring interviews with producer Meryl hard name, Schreiberman, who done a lot for this movie. He's responsible for the cover art image, to be honest. That scene in there. Actors May Nutter, Lee DeBronx, Brian Rasmussen, Gene Glazer, and stunt coordinator Ron Hutchinson. I believe that is an hour long. Its making of is over an hour long, if I'm not mistaken, and a lot of good information on that. Unfortunately, people like Clu Gulager have passed away, and Billy Drago and Mickey Jones. So many people from this movie, Bruce Glover, have passed away, so unfortunately they're not going to be in here. Sam Bottoms. So just a huge chunk of the cast, mostly the main cast. Audio interview with actor Bruce Glover, conducted by tough guy film expert Mike Malloy in 2006. Good stuff there. Mike Malloy, he does tons of documentaries or special features. Really focuses a lot on Euro crime films, which he's really an expert on, so that's good stuff. Yeah, and this interview is conducted in 2006, so, some of the stuff Bruce Glover says is dated, of course, but Bruce Glover, great character actor, wonderful character actor. Teaser trailer, theatrical trailer, video trailer, still gallery, collector's booklet, liner notes by Michael Gingold and Michael Felsher, fold-out double-sided poster, 6 double-sided collector's cards. So, one of my favorite movies. Might as well just take this plastic off. Sometimes you cut it right, sometimes it's plastic stays on. Finally on 4K. Great release. I'm loving what Red Cert Pictures is doing. A lot of people do complain a lot of times that, oh, the price point's so expensive, and I understand, but there's going to be a normal version as well, I'm sure of it, so you can hold off. But for me, I had to have the expensive Hunter's Blood, because that's just it's one of those movies for me. It's been a white whale for a very long time. Okay, the next one here is from Radiance Films, and this is Aesthetics of a Bullet. And this is a Japanese film. And this director, I've seen a couple of his films, Sadao, Nakajima, and I remember liking them. It doesn't stand out as like one of those big household Japanese names like Kinji Fukasaku or Takashi Miike or somebody like that, or even a Kurosawa. But he is a name that is known, and he is a decent cult following. This one here... This is a pretty impressive movie, made in 1973, and they mention on the cover, of course, it predates Taxi Driver, because there are some similarities. Foremost, it's kind of an outcast kind of character, a very bizarre character, lead character, a very gray kind of, subject matter, anti-hero, villain, really, a character who talks in the mirror, kind of getting ready for what he's going to do. Very similar to Robert De Niro or Travis in Taxi Driver. But this is, I call to mind, like, listening to a lot of these special features, and I constantly bring this up because they do seem to follow this, very much so, is a lot of the Yakuza films or Japanese crime films tend to focus on lower level characters in these. It's not always the big boss or anything like the Japanese Godfather films. A lot of the minor characters, there's always a part in those movies where they spend some time with low level Yakuza, because I guess that's a little bit a huge chunk of this kind of, part of the culture and everything like that. So what we have here is a full blown kind of loser character who is addicted to gambling. He has a girlfriend that he puts into prostitution to make him money so he can go spend all the money in gambling. He's always having these little kind of things to try to make extra money or rip people off, and this one he's like has a bunch of rabbits that he's selling, and he refuses to feed them more because he doesn't want them being bigger. They won't be cute, people won't buy them. So he's got this whole thing, all to the next thing like that, and basically some heavy, upper Yakuza. They don't even call him in. It's like a phone call, basically, or like they're not shown on screen, which is definitely a purposely done thing. And they tell him, we're going to give you $1 million and a gun, and we want to send you in this territory. Your only goal is to cause a lot of problems. And they call this kind of character a bullet, because they want him to shoot the gun and cause a big kind of stir, and then be killed in retaliation, so they'll have a reason to start a war. They need this reason to start a war. That's kind of common, right? Where a lot of these younger guys are the ones who get everything caught up in the battles without honor, the new battles without honor, and the Japanese Godfather movies. It's like the young guys who stir things up, and eventually it gets built higher and higher. And they want this character who's just basically a complete loser, misunderstood kind of character. I don't even know if he's misunderstood. He's just completely oblivious to a lot of the things and all this stuff like that, to go in there and wreak havoc. But when he does that, he has this like kind of persona, right? Because he has nothing to lose, and the other gangs are trying to save face. They don't want to cause any problems, because if they do cause these problems, there's going to be retaliation, and that's kind of where it stands. So he has this, like, essentially he's untouchable for a while, where he has his power, and he starts this affair with a woman who's actually was dating like a higher up crime guy. So all this kind of stuff like that, and what comes out of it is just this kind of character, like, living a life as a big shot for once, not really understanding his purpose, why he was sent here, and not really getting it. But there's some nice touches in there that he's like obsessed with this mountain range that is thought to be like where the gods descended, and that plays really nicely into the end of the movie. This does feel and play like a classic 70s movie. It doesn't feel like a studio movie, and they said that the director went outside the studio sources because no one wanted to make this movie. I believe it is also probably based on a book as well. That seems to always be the case, and I listened to all the features, and they're all kind of bleeding together. But as far as the special features are concerned, we have an appreciation by Robert Slowakik, new interview with Kariyoshi Kumikuri. And that is a guy who worked directly under this director. He was an AD on his last film, and he talks a little bit about the director and his style and about this movie and all that kind of stuff like that, which was interesting. And then we have an archival interview with the director himself, and he talks predominantly about working with the lead actor and telling a lot of stories about him and how it worked with him, and how he basically lived two different lives. Essentially his first life, where he was this chaotic, full of energy, dangerous actor, and eventually he would kind of move into television to kind of, like, I guess, save his body and his life, kind of deal like that. But no, this is a very interesting movie, very good special features. I would recommend this one if you're a big fan of the Japanese crime film and you want to see something a little bit off the beaten path that's just a little bit different from the kind of typical stuff. It's not like a full-blown action film or anything of that nature, but this character is just kind of a horrible person, but also the lead kind of loser kind of character is intriguing and interesting. Good stuff here. I would check this one out. Aesthetics of a Bullet. Okay, we have another interesting one from Radiance Films here, and this is Solo from 1970. And this is directed by Jean-Pierre Mocky, and I have only seen one Jean-Pierre Mocky film, and that is, of course, L'Automne from 1982, which is, I think, a fantastic film. And this movie, Jean-Pierre Mocky and I think a friend of overheard a couple students in like 68 talking about, you know, this whole ordeal. There was a movement for a revolution in 1968. They called them the 68ers, and they wanted the kind of this rising, all these problems and turmoil and things of that nature, and they were talking about an uprising, a revolution, and this got his mind thinking, kind of moving. This time, you know, the years of lead were still going on, so there's a lot of political turmoil and everything, so it got his mind moving, and he decided to make this movie in 1970 about this kind of idea. And Jean-Pierre Mocky had to come out of retirement from acting. He was directing, but he had stopped acting because, you know, I'm not really necessarily sure why, but he steps in front of the camera because a lot of the people that he wanted couldn't do it or refused out to not do it, and he talks a lot of big actors turning it down, of course Alain Delon and among others too, but he ends up taking the role and he does a tremendous job. Now his younger brother, in the very beginning of this movie, we open up with this orgy, and I guess it's all these big shots sleeping with underage girls, and this group of young people just mow them down. I mean, the special effects aren't necessarily fantastic, but the idea of seeing these old men in their underwear and these like young girls getting shot together is really kind of crazy and weird. And you find out that they're underage later on, which brings a whole new element to it. And there's a line in here which says, well, you're going to waste a couple big shots who sleep with 15-year-olds, it's going to change the world. And you're like, wow, crazy. But so what we have here is that Jean-Pierre Mocky's the older brother, and he realizes, trying to go visit his brother, that his brother is involved directly with this terrorist group, and they're planning on doing this big kind of bombing, and he starts to kind of intertwine into here, trying to catch up with his brother and stop him, but he's never necessarily going to catch up with him at a certain time, and he becomes basically entangled in this whole thing where these couple of police officers are after him. It's a relatively fast-paced movie and goes by pretty damn quick, and it has a haunting score that plays out through the entire film. It actually has Jean-Pierre Mocky in it as well, kind of doing some of the humming, but it's just a scary, haunting score here. This is really good and really tragic. Again, great 70s one here. Stands out because it has some historical context and references and things of that nature that I didn't necessarily know about, that kind of France kind of movement. But I mean, at that time, the late 60s, 70s, there's a lot of political turmoil everywhere, and things of that nature, Vietnam War in America and stuff, and all that kind of stuff like that. But this one really stood out. Really great stuff. Made on a budget, but it didn't seem to hold the movie back at all. Jean-Pierre Mocky's fantastic in it, and definitely the biggest actor in it at the time. A couple of the people would go on to be in other films. You'll recognize the guy from L'Automne, the police officer in that, is like a waiter in this one who sells out some people to the cops. But the special features are also pretty good. 4K restoration by Eclair Classics, supervised by Mocky Delicious Products, uncompromised mono audio, archival interview with director, writer, and actor Jean-Pierre Mocky. Talked a little bit about who he initially was trying to cast and stuff like that. Archival interview with actor Annie, that's the lead. I'm gonna have trouble with her last name. This is like her first big role. She talks about that, going on and moving on, and basically having a kind of a meeting Jean-Pierre Mocky later on, and having a, you know, talking about him, and having his, like, talking to how his character was kind of yeller at the time, but he had a lot of warmth as well. Interview with Mocky's assistant and friend Eric Leroy. And this one's pretty interesting because he kind of breaks down the movie and talks about other films that Jean-Pierre Mocky played in and made that are very similar to this one. And one in particular sounds really interesting. Well, this character kind of was a reoccurring character. Image gallery, optional English subtitles, reversible sleeve featuring designs based on the original posters, limited edition booklet featuring archival interviews with Mocky. So good stuff here, region free. I would recommend this one. This one kind of surprised me. And I'd seen one Jean-Pierre Mocky movie that I thought was absolutely fantastic. And I have the box set from Radiance Films myself. I think Kill the Referees in that one with Michel Surat, who's a great actor. So I'll have to check that one out as well. Okay, we're moving into the second disc of the Adventure Calls, Carl May at CCC, and I am really I feel like we should probably review The Shoot and Through Wild Kurdistan together because they're direct sequels to each other. They share a lot of the same cast and a lot of the same themes, and they kind of bleed in together for me. But let's see if we can keep them separated. And the first one, of course, is The Shoot from 1964, and Robert Siodmak did this one, who did like The Spiral Staircase. So he had been established in Hollywood. I knew I mispronounced his name. And The Spiral Staircase is a popular film, actually, amongst a lot of classic horror fans and things of that nature. Let me pull this out here. I'm getting it all mixed up here. These are the thin cases here. So we have the original Lex Baxter here and the other actor from the previous Old Shatterhand films returning as different characters, but they're very similar. And this is very much in the same vein as this. So basically what we have here is we have like these Middle Eastern characters, where they're at in like the Middle East and whatnot. And Lex Baxter is always like the heroic guy and everything like that. And he goes to meet an old British friend of his, who's another huge character, comedic relief character, and his butler, Archie. Archie, I believe, was in actually the old Shatterhand movie as well. It's kind of a guy going looking for flowers. I don't remember. I think the second one. But so basically, they end up realizing that a French guy has been kidnapped that they're supposed to meet up with. And so they're going to try to rescue him. At the same time, they come across, a bunch of bandits that had trashed this place, and they meet up with somebody else that's also looking for this Shoot, who's this kind of character that translates to the Yellow One, which is an alternative for this movie, or the Yellow Vial One, or something along those lines. So they're looking for the Shoot. It's pretty obvious who the Shoot is. There's some mystery to be played, I guess you'll say, in that kind of aspect. But they end up kind of figuring it out, and they run across all sorts of different villains, and Len Baxter has to kind of face off against a weird, corrupt magician kind of guy, and show that he is kind of, false and all that kind of stuff like that. And at the same time, there's tons like weird comic reliefs, like the British guy is always about adventure no matter how much his life is put in danger. In fact, there's a great gag where he's actually imprisoned and he's basically making his butler act as if nothing has happened. He's like, oh, you must ask for more ransom than that. He actually is probably my favorite part of these movies, one of them. I think Lex Baxter is actually he's a good lead. He's a big tall guy. He fits it. He's got like this handsome kind of clearly like German style look to him, which fits these movies. But his sidekick is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not going to try to pronounce his full name. The whole gag is that his name is like, this is 10 words long, and each word makes him more noble or whatnot. But he basically, his whole joke is that he is incredibly, Muslim, and the jokes are like, he doesn't realize what pork is, all sorts of stuff like that. He's excited to eat ham until he realizes that's pork and things of that nature. The movie is incredibly silly, incredibly adventurous. The action's decent, the bad guy's decent. There's a couple good goons in here. Overall, it's kind of like the old Shatterhand movies where it's gorgeously shot. Everything's professionally well done. Score, locations, scale is pretty damn good as well. And this one wasn't actually shot in Yugoslavia like the Shatterhand movies. It's shot in Spain. Both these were shot in Spain, so that adds a little bit difference. But honestly, oh, I'm dropping everything. Sorry about that, guys. But honestly, I do feel like the Yugoslavian stuff looks a little bit better, maybe because it kind of took me back. I don't think I've ever actually seen too many movies shot in Yugoslavia off the top of my head. As for Westerns and stuff like that, this is not necessarily a Western, of course. But as far as the special features are concerned, let me read on the back here. I know there is a handful of them. I think there's introductions to both films. I don't think either of them actually have any. Sir Christopher Frayling does the introductions, but I don't think there's any. There is. Oh yeah, there is something kind of interesting here. There's an archival making of The Shoot, which basically is like a 21-minute, like made for German TV kind of a thing, which is pretty interesting because we have interviews with the actual actors and stuff like that, talking about working with the directors and talking about Arthur Brenner's on there, talking about getting this produced, all sorts of things of that nature and everything like that. And he doesn't really hold back. He's pretty upfront. Okay, the next one here is The Wild Men of Kurdistan, which is a direct sequel, follows Len Baxter and his faithful companions and everything of that nature. And I don't have all that much to say about this one. Not that it's bad. It's actually by the same director who did The Phantom of Soho, which CCC also did, and like The Racetrack Murders, a lot of these kind of German kind of crime films, which are pretty good, especially The Phantom of Soho. I remember really enjoying that one. But this one doesn't really separate itself very much from the original, which I guess is what you'd be looking for. I think it's shorter, and that helps. helps a little bit. But I also, I do think the first one is just a little bloated, but I think it has a lot of the same kind of character type kind of stuff happening here, where we have these bandits and they run across them and they have to stand up against them and figure them out. But we have this element where, you know, Lex Baxter is given like this beautiful kind of this maiden lady for him, this from you know, Fernando, oh geez, what's the actor's name? But he's in a slew of these movies. But he ends up being kind of like this kind of king character, and he ends up having, there's like a pairing here where we have these two kind of separate adventures going on, of course. And there's more females in this one that are kind of driving the story forward. But overall, it's very similar. It's not much in difference. The jokes continue, and if I'm mixing these up, I remember the bad guys in this one. I can't remember the pair of brothers. I think is actually from the original film, and those guys kind of stand out. They're very fun. But this one, I think it's very much in the same vein. I can't really differentiate the two. If you watch these movies back to back, you would not be able to tell any of them apart, which is kind of funny because a lot of the actors in here talking about it, they actually didn't register that they were making two movies. In fact, they thought they were making one movie, and they pulled a Jess Franco on them. They actually filmed two movies, which makes perfect sense because these movies bleed together, same sets, same kind of characters, interacting with almost the same types of villains. Well, The Shoot was more of like a predominantly like classy, intelligent villain. I think this one is more like a kind of soldier-esque villain. And there's a nice little kind of thing here where they surround them with like the kind of local people, and then Baxter's like kind of playing into like a little bit of the politics and using it. And I have to mention, oh geez, who's the Werner Peters ends up popping up in the second one, and he's probably a highlight for me. He pops up in almost all like the Dr. Mabuse sequels. He's just a great character actor, very memorable, heavyset bald guy. I think if you saw Werner Peters, you'd definitely recognize him, but he's probably one of my favorite parts of this. Overall, nice fun adventure movies when I can't really dive deep into them because I don't think they separate themselves enough, which is surprising because the directors, obviously two different directors, but I think I prefer maybe the second one a little bit better just to be more fast paced, but there's parts of the first one I think are better. Maybe the first one is probably better shot, if that makes any sense, but both overall fun. I wouldn't say that they're anything super special. Maybe the Shatterhand movies are a little bit better, I'm not so sure, but I'm looking forward to checking out the rest of this set. Okay, we're moving on to the second disc of The Worlds of Lucile Hadžihalilović, which I still have trouble saying. And this one, I think, is probably the movie that got the most I don't want to say like most exposure, but this is a movie that I had heard about. I had heard about The Innocents as well, but this is Evolution from 2015. I think that was it IFC Screen Factory had initially put this one out at some point. But yeah, this I think is more your traditional style horror film, as traditional as this director can make, and I don't mean that as an insult or anything like that. I like untraditional films here, but yeah. So watching the interview, she said her biggest inspirations for this movie were Eraserhead and Lovecraft, and I immediately thought Lovecraft as well. But as she said Eraserhead, I was like, okay, I can see that as well. And that she said that this kind of had to have this surreal, dreamlike quality. And then she said she read a lot of Lovecraft, and it definitely plays into that. But again, it's very much as like I guess you'd say like a brother-sister piece to Innocents, because the Innocents follow these kind of girls in this school, and it's a very kind of thick mystery in what's happening, and you kind of see the mythology, and you don't really necessarily know how things work or how it is, but you're in a strange world, and you're trying to figure everything out. And although it's not exactly said, you do get a grasp on what is happening, but it's still a fairly rewarding kind of experience. I thought this movie was pretty dark. It's a dark looking movie, and at first I was like, I'm not so sure. It's kind of hard to see a lot of the stuff that's going on here, but it's definitely done that way on purpose. A lot of it is shot at night and at dark in the water, and it's a coastal movie where the water is a huge part of it. And if it's a Lovecraftian kind of style thing, how could the water not play a huge part of it, right? That fear of the water, the fear of the kind of unknown. But what we have here in the very beginning is a very kind of, I guess it feels like a coming of age kind of story here in the very opening, a very memorable thing. This a beautiful coastal town. I'm not necessarily sure exactly where they filmed it, if they said I missed it, but I don't want to say it's like Greece, but because it doesn't necessarily feel like Greece either. It does and it doesn't, if that makes any sense. But like you watch the Nico Makarakis movies and you see like the beautiful like island or something like Island of the Who Can Kill a Child or something like that. It's in Spain or Greece and that one, but you know, that kind of area, if you will. But this kid is swimming in the water and he's kind of diving in deep, and he sees a young boy drowned on the bottom, and there's this red starfish on him, and that kind of like becomes this kind of prevalent thing. And as the director talks about the starfish and the stars in the water and the stars in the sky, all sorts of weird things like that, like symbolism, and they're supposed to match up. And a lot of that I don't necessarily know if it comes out unless you're diving in deep for this kind of stuff. It's one of these movies where you can tell the director has a deep, rich mythology, and although maybe you're not picking it up, it's still there, and I like that. Overall, I did find this a pretty good film. And what's different in Innocence, you know, the Innocence seems to be almost like I thought it was like some sort of pedophile ring, and I was like, oh, this is disturbing, but maybe it's not that at all. It's very weird. And this one, it definitely has like this weird kind of bioengineering kind of quality about it, where you don't know what's natural and unnatural and scientific, but you start to think that a lot of these women that are kind of, each one has a child, that are roughly the same age, and they're kind of like, you're like, this has got to be like a mother, father, and it's not necessarily that. And as it goes on, our lead character starts to see glimpses of weird things, including probably the most standout moment to me was seeing like I don't want to even spoil it, but something with octopus kind of suctions on it, which I thought was pretty fucking wild, pretty memorable stuff here. And it ends on this kind of open note that I thought was kind of interesting as well. Disturbing to a certain quality, interesting, good stuff. I really like this one. I thought it was interesting, good stuff. That's like a positive to say. Interesting movie. Looking forward to checking out some of the later films, because there was like a 9-year difference between this one and The Innocents. I'm gonna a huge chunk in here. This was 2004 and this is 2015, so 11 years. And I know that she's had big gaps in her filmography, but as far as the special features, we have introduction by Lucile, Hadžihalilović, and then we have interview with the director and the cinematographer Manuel da Costi in conversation, and then we have an interview with writer Alante Cavarate. I'm so trouble with names. I sound like a moron. But yeah, interesting movie. I would recommend this if you're into Lovecraftian kind of things. And I guess I would say the closest movie I can say to this, although I feel like it has less religious Catholic stuff than this one, definitely none of that, but I would say Dark Waters, the 1992-93 Italian Eastern European kind of co-production, which is one of my favorites. I think it does have some similarities to that, and I mean that as an utmost compliment. But check it out, Evolution. Good stuff. All right, guys, let's get into those 1983 movies.
I have returned.
Okay. Show me.
Where is the music now? The sound of laughter. There was never laughter.
Like?
What's what like?
Screwing a psycho.
What the fuck was that?
It's gone.
God blows dead dogs. Just lay it in there.
Eat shit and die, Ricky!
Eat shit and live, Bill.
Yeah, Bill, he's a little wet.
31. 32. 32. Year of a man's prime, loved by many women. He might still learn to swim. 32. Going. Gone.
The kid was cut in half, Arnie. They had to scrape his legs up with a shovel.
Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do with shit? Scrape it up with a little shovel?
One final moment of revenge.
Wondering what's real. All of it is real.
You want to see something really scary?
You bet.
Really?
Yeah.
Get the video, Joe! Long live the new flesh!
No choice but to kill the son of a bitch.
Living one's entire life in a state of fear. It is all I have ever known. Fear.
Are you ready?
Okay, go ahead. What are you doing?
Okay, the first one up from 1983 is a rewatch. I've seen this one a couple times before, and this is Nightmares. This is this the only anthology from 1983? I'm sure I'll think of something, but I feel like it might be. And this initially started as like a TV movie, but I guess it was good enough that they were like, hell, we're going to throw it in theaters, and that's what they did. It's Josef Sargent, who did Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, an amazing movie. This movie has a really strong cast. Christina Rains from The Sentinel, Anthony James, William Sanderson, and then we also have Emilio Estevez, Billy Jacoby, and Lance Hendrickson, and last Richard Masur, Veronica Cartwright, and the poor little girl who died incredibly young from Susanna Smile. So great cast for an anthology, well directed, well acted. The stories are pretty decent. The first story is a classic kind of there's a killer out and about, kind of loose, and I gotta go somewhere, and it's kind of played like an old kind of urban legend story. This one's well done, well acted, and has a nice little twist, anything you would expect in here. William Sanderson, always love him. He's also in China Lake from 1983, and Anthony James is that bunch of movies, and I know that Ken Coakley mentioned him before, and he's an actor I've recognized thousands of times, but Unforgiven is probably the big one. He's in a bunch of Clint Eastwood stuff, but Anthony James just has that kind of face where he's untrustworthy in freaking movies. But the first story is pretty good. The first three are actually written by the same person. The last one's written by somebody else. And then we have the second story here, which is the Bishop one, which is Emilio Estevez, pretty young Emilio Estevez here, and he's this game whiz. He's great at video games, arcade culture here in 1983, right? And he basically is really good at these games. He hustles a bunch of people. Billy Jacoby's his buddy from Bloody Birthday and tons of other stuff. Superstition. Billy Jacoby's in a lot of horror movies, but especially during this time in the early 80s. But what happens is Emilio Estevez becomes obsessed with beating this game and getting to level 7. But when he does, it becomes a fight for his life. And I don't spoil it, but you get what's going on here. Yeah, obviously techno horror kind of style stuff. We'd see other things later that came out like that arcade and stuff like that. Evolver. It reminds me of Evolver in arcade, okay? But Evolver's more... I don't want to spoil absolutely everything. But the third story here is a classic lost kind of fate hint, losing your faith kind of deal. Lance Henderson's pretty early on in his career. He had already done Piranha 2, and he had done the... I can't remember the one for Charlie Band, the Full Moon one that he did for Charlie Band. The one where everybody's locked up, Mansion of Doom. I think that's the one, but he had also done... The Visitor, so he had done a handful of movies, but Lance Henderson wasn't that household name that would come later. I mean, I don't know if he's ever been a household name, but everybody knows who the fuck he is after a certain point. But so Lance Henderson is this priest, and he witnesses the death of a child, and he basically can't shake it. It's not told in traditional order exactly, but he's going to leave the church, and he ends up taking a thing of holy water with him as just drinking water, and he's driving across, and a devil car kind of comes out of the desert literally, and starts chasing him, and it's kind of a road horror movie. Kind of fun because, you know, the same year we have Christine, and we also have The Accident, the Hong Kong movie, which involves kind of a car being some sort of evil entity as well. So, and we also have the TV movie where somebody's actually soul is put into a car. I can't remember what that one's called. I know in the main video at the end, but we'll talk about it. But that's a really bizarre one here, kind of a comedy, kind of horror film. But it's Dr. Lanier, I think it is, something along those lines. But yeah, this one's decent. I love Lance Henderson. Pretty solid kind of anthology story here. And the last one isn't my favorite. I think the first one's actually one of the better ones, and I think the last one might be one of the better ones as well. I think the most memorable one is the one with Emilio Estevez, because the video game kind of deal at the time. that's the one that people brought up. But this last one here is another similar to another movie that came out this year of unknown origin, which is why can't I think of the Peter Weller Killer Rat movie directed by, why can't I remember the director's name who did Tombstone? George P. Cosmatos. So this one here, it's kind of in that vein here, where we have Richard Masur and Veronica Cartwright, and they have a young daughter, and the Susanna Smiles girl, and a lot of stuff starts going bad. Richard Masur is kind of a dick. He overworks. He yells at his wife. He's cheapskate. All this kind of bad stuff about him, and we kind of learn that there's this kind of giant rat tearing up their frickin' house, eating the cat, all sorts of shit, and it's supposedly an evil rat from centuries old that kind of goes after evil people. But yeah, it's fun, it's entertaining until the last shot of the rat. It's basically like a superimposed real rat trying to look damaged. It looks like shit. That's the only downfall of the movie. In fact, that rat looks so bad. Overall, decent. No wraparound on here, but I think it's an overall fun, kind of cheap, kind of relatively cheap TV horror movie that was changed into a theatrical last minute. I like it. I would recommend it. You have available available in 2 versions, widescreen and full frame. Audio commentary with executive producer Anthony Mirisch and actress Christina Rains. This one is decent. It seems that the guy who does the moderates the commentary did a commentary with Christina Rains on the Sentinel, and he constantly brings that up, that commentary, I guess, that rapport. But overall, decent. Check it out. If you like anthologies, you could do a lot worse. You could do better. Of course, Creepshow does exist. Trick or Treat does exist. But you could do a lot worse. I mean, Tales of the Crypt exists. Vault of Horror exists. There's a lot of better ones, but I enjoyed this one. Fun stuff. Boy, oh frickin' boy, here we go here. The Jean-Pierre Simon. Of course, legendary director who did Pieces from 1982, but he also did stuff like Mystery of Monster Island in 81, Sea Devils in 82, he'd go on to do Slugs in 87, he'd do Endless Descent in 1990, Cthulhu Mansion in like 92. So Jean-Pierre Simon is an interesting Spanish director, and kind of an interesting guy, in fact. But this one here is from 1983, and this is Extraterrestrial Visitors. I wonder what this is like. Is this inspired by anything? I don't think so, obviously. I think this one was a Mystery Science Theater at one point, so it became popular there. Probably a butchered version that people laugh at a lot. But for good reason, too. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of those kind of Riff Tracks Mystery Science Theater deal, but I can understand to a certain extent. So this one here, Jean-Pierre Simon, is an odd guy. I love Pieces. I like Endless Descent's fine. Slugs I love. Mystery on Monster Island and Sea Devils aren't great, but they're at least semi-decent. This one here I actually like better than those. This is a wacky, weird-ass movie. So, yeah, you think, oh, this is just an E.T. kind of take, right? But it's a little bit more violent than that, and I think it actually crosses into the horror territory. God, I don't know why Jean-Pierre Simon kept casting Ian Serra as his lead guy here. He's not a very convincing musical artist playboy casting this, or he wasn't very convincing as like a playboy in Pieces either. But there's some other familiar faces in here, including Frank Brana, who's in, For a Few Dollars More, the Sergio Leone movie, and he's also in Pieces. But yeah, the cast in here is not. I can't think of anybody else. I mean, they look familiar, but they're not like huge actors. They pop up in Spanish and Italian horror films. But what we have here is a group, I guess like a band, and some of their friends are going to go out and kind of get a nice camping trip. But they're going to an isolated location with really terrible weather. At the same time, it's like a mom, her son, and like an uncle. I don't know what the relation is with this. They're kind of staying out here, and the little boy loves animals. He's obsessed with animals, so he has a whole collection, a rabbit, all this kind of stuff like that. And there's some poachers in the woods, and when you're a poacher poaching eggs or whatever the fuck you're doing, when you run across something that looks like it's been a meteor and it's this giant den of eggs, first thing you do is just start smashing them all for no particular fucking reason, but it ends up being alien eggs, and all of the eggs are broken. The adult alien comes in and kind of kills this guy. And pissed off, the little baby alien that survives ends up wandering into the house and becomes best friends with this little kid. Hey, it's E.T., but it's just wacky and weird, almost like Jean-Pierre Simon didn't even watch E.T. and just was like, what's E.T. about? Tell me what E.T.'s about. Okay, I got it. We'll make our own E.T. I need it next week. But it's probably an easy joke to make, but I don't know if it's untrue. So essentially, the little boy becomes best friends with the alien that he calls Trumpy because it has a snout. Hilarious that it's fucking Trumpy. It's so fucking weird. Perfect. But yeah, of course, everybody starts getting picked off by the mother alien in really weird ways. And all these people want to kill the alien, including the baby alien. But the little kid's going to stand up for his buddy, because Trumpy didn't do anything wrong. There's this kitten in this movie that's fucking terrified the whole movie. He's like, kid grabbing it and throwing it around, and every time the kitten sees him, he's like terrified. But it's an overall decent movie. It's fun, it's goofy. The score is way better than the movie has any right to be. I think some of that's probably the library music stuff they used in Pieces, but the actual score is pretty decent. There's some decent features on here. I didn't rewatch them. I watched them when I initially covered this movie, but we have a feature-length 101-minute version movie of the Simone's Jigsaw Journey into the universe of the Jean-Pierre Simon, which I love. Good stuff. The Weekend in Hell, an interview with actor Emilio Linder, composing the Cosmos, interview with soundtrack composer Lamberto Pastor, private concert from Lamberto Pastor, alternate Pod People opening credits, and we have a soundtrack CD, which is pretty damn good, honestly, for this movie. Some of it's a little bit magical and whimsical, which I think fits with the movie. Overall, I think that Extraterrestrial Visitors is fun. There's 2 other E.T. ripoffs from 1983 that I'm going to watch that are Filipino movies. I don't know which one's first, but they seem to be sequels of each other. They're both very long. It's going to be a long fucking day for me when I watch those movies, for sure. But yeah, Extraterrestrial Visitors. Have fun with it. Okay, the next one here is, again, from 1983, and it's directed by Eckhard Schmidt, who did Der Fan from 1982, and this is a loose trilogy, a second in a loose trilogy here. So the first one is Der Fan, which is a fantastic movie about obsession and fandom. The sequel here is The Gold of Love, and the last one is The Law from 85, which I also enjoy. The Gold of Love is probably my least favorite of the three, but they all kind of involve music and obsession to a certain extent. I think the first two are fit more with the trilogy than the last one. But so what we have here is this young girl who's trying to sneak away into a concert. She's obsessed with this band and really wants to see them. So she basically goes to this kind of late night concert. I think she's 16 years old, and she wants to sneak in. And they tell her, "Listen, come to the back door. We'll let you in." She goes to the back door, and what she witnesses is a murder. This woman has killed this other woman over drugs, and they're not going to let her go. It kind of turns into like a Judgment Night kind of scenario or something of that line. They see something that she shouldn't see, and now they're after her. There's a gang of I think 3 of them that are after her to kill her, and it's basically one of these kind of one crazy night kind of scenarios here, but there's a lot of weird surreal stuff going on. Music's cut into it as well. Even one of the songs from Der Fan plays. There's a couple favorite moments in here, but my real favorite moment is when she runs into like this weird like slow dance nightclub, and there's just people dancing like this for like 5 minutes, and she's like kind of hiding out in there. But it is a bizarre one. She actually has this kind of weird moment where she like has this surreal trip, like they inject her with something, or she imagines this whole crazy thing. It gets pretty explicit with nudity, blood dripping down genitals and stuff of that nature. Overall, this movie's decent. I think that it would be a little bit better if it was a better quality, because a lot of this filmed in the streets, and I think that the depth and stuff would look a lot better and it'd be cleaner and you could tell what the hell's going on a little bit more. But it's interesting nonetheless, especially that it's by Eckhard Schmidt, who did a fantastic movie, one of the best from 1982 in Der Fan. But this one is worth watching. I would give it a slight recommend. I don't think it's, again, as good as the other two in the trilogy, but it's also the least kind of high kind of quality, and it does have that whole music element in here as well, that obsession, and which is something that Eckhard Schmidt knew quite a bit about, being like kind of from a film journalist background, a music journalist kind of background. So check it out. It's definitely worth watching if you're a big fan of his other film. The Gold of Love. Okay, the Patreon pick is kind of an odd one here, and this is directed by Douglas Sirk, and this is There's Always Tomorrow. So, when you get a classic movie here, you got to take in consideration that if you're seeing a lot of tropes or stories that you've seen before, this might have been one of the early ones, and things have ripped it off or come from it. But what I took away from this movie here, it's basically about kind of two characters, one who is going through a midlife crisis and has a lot of regret, resentment towards his family, overworked, feels underappreciated, which is a thing that a lot of guys have, and at this point being put in movies, it's become almost like a punchline, almost a joke. He is never really taken seriously anymore, right? Midlife crisis is basically the punchline to a bunch of jokes, every sitcom you've ever watched in the 90s. And also we have a character in Barbara Stanwyck. Fred McMurray plays the lead character I was just talking about in Barbara Stanwyck, who is a career woman, who's like always obsessed with her work, who's, had a glaze with love, but as it surpassed her, you know what I mean? And she's focused on her work and everything of that nature. So Fred McMurray is a family man. He's got 3 kids and a loving wife, and he's completely burnt out. He works at the toy factory, puts a lot of hours in, dedicates his life to his family, and he feels underappreciated. And one day an old coworker of his that used to work for him shows up in Barbara Stanwyck, and she's a completely successful woman, completely different from his wife, all that kind of stuff like that. And he immediately kind of falls head over heels in love with her, realizes that she still carries a picture of him in her wallet, this whole idea that they almost had a thing, but it didn't necessarily work out. So their instant connection and everything of that nature, and it's not explicit or anything like that, but there's obviously some tension there, and they start to see a little bit more each other. They run into each other originally on kind of like a work kind of vacation thing, and they start to hang around each other more. And the young kids start to kind of realize that the young son more than the other ones, and the daughter and the son are arguing what's going on amongst this. But and I think that the movie's pretty standard in that kind of element here. The acting is good, especially from Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck. I mean, some of the acting does seem dated, but I think those two are probably the strongest, obviously. Fred McMurray, this is kind of funny to say, but to be honest, he's got a Lon Chaney Jr. vibe going on, where he just seems like the Wolfman, and he's really desperate, like, oh, when the moon is full, I'm going to cheat on my wife. But I know it's just a weird reference, but everything comes back to horror movies for me, and I've seen the Wolfman a bunch of times as a kid. I love Lon Chaney Jr. in that movie. He's my favorite part of the movie. But that element, right, like he just is like has this haunted kind of look to him. But I think that really brings this movie together is the big end speech from Barbara Stanwyck. I think it's sad. I think it's tragic in a way. But I also think it's appreciative to kind of tackle these kind of issues that are pretty known and pretty standard in a lot of things, but also not made a joke of, not made light of. And I enjoyed it. I thought the camera work was really good, too. I was surprised by the camera work. The camera moves a lot. And this was before Steadicam, before a lot of the things they have now. But I was like impressed. I was like, oh, this is looking outside the window and it's moving closer. And I was like, oh, this is well done. Where it will stay still and then move and stay pause and stuff like that. They just and this is, I doubt, a budget movie, but they use their camera work well. And I know a lot of times those kind of camera movements and that stuff like that will be due to budget constraints, or like, well, zoom in and do it. It's not that. It doesn't look shaky. It looks very professionally well done. Very interesting camera work for an old movie, and that's one thing I did notice. It popped out to me. But I really like this. And it was, I think that the final act brought it together for me. At first, I was like, what are we doing? Like, I feel like and that's just, biased is because you've seen stuff like this before to a certain extent, but I enjoyed it. Good stuff. Check it out. There's always tomorrow. All right, let's get into these questions, comments, and concerns. Mike Save, sudden impact, not sudden death. Of course, I do it every time. I'm going to do it a million more fucking times. I know sudden death is a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Venom, what is this? Venom Overlord. Hey, Parka. Hi, Parka. Are there trends in movies you miss? I kind of miss the 80s killer robot trend, Predator, Cyborg 2, Cyborg Cop 2, banger films we need more, everything is shifting, KA being a threat. I miss the killer robot. I do miss the killer robot. I think you mean maybe RoboCop instead of Predator or Terminator, but regardless, I know exactly what you mean. Like Class of 1999, love that. Robot Teachers. In 1991, there's so many like killer robot movies. There's Mandroika, like that droid, Eve of Destruction. I loved my fucking killer robots, man. They were everywhere. I'm a big fan of it. I do miss it. That's a good one right there. I also miss like crazy action films, right? This insane like animal attacks with real animals, although I don't want it. They shouldn't be made anymore, but I do miss that kind of stuff. They could still do it, but it would just be CGI. So I'm looking at more like, I'm not actually picking trends. I'm trying to think of something that basically would be erased due to technology and the changing of things. Like Killer Robots is a great one. But Beyond Sour Ground, you're 100% right about the nostalgia factor, Dave. For the past few weeks, I keep thinking it's a shame I'll never stay in that hotel again. He's talking about Wasteland. I love that place, which is total bullshit because it was a crappy for a Holiday Inn. It was even worse for a Best Western Plus. But I always thought there was something poignantly grindhouse about one of the most thrilling conventions on earth being hosted at such a dilapidated place. It was our 42nd Street. For some reason, I found Boggy Creek 2 really enjoyable. Surprisingly so, in fact. I liked it better than the original. I'm not sure why, because it's objectively an inferior movie, and the movie really doesn't work at all that well, as you pointed out in your review, but I liked it. I'm hoping someone else will reissue the film on Blu-ray. I had it on my watch list to check out, so I didn't get stuck with a VSA I didn't want. But Vinegar Syndrome dropped the price of $10 during one of the 24-hour sales. It was a busy day for me, and they showed over 1,000 copies in stock, so I thought I could check it out online and order it later that night. Nope, they sold out within a few hours. And believe it or not, that Boggy Creek 2 disc is pretty pricey on eBay. Now, so maybe Vinegar Syndrome underestimated the demand for the film. I have a rule about not overpaying for things or buying things at inflated prices, and that's served me well in over 20 years of collecting. Are there any rare movies or out-of-print movies releases that you took forever to track down, or you're willfully overpaid just to have in your collection? Back in the day, I paid like $32 for a Beasties VHS, and that was crazy back then. It was a lot different back then when you could get VHS for like 50 cents a dollar or something along the lines. What else? I paid high dollar for Hunter's Blood. I tracked down forever back in the day to get a barrel release of Necromantic and Necromantic 2. Some I probably paid a little bit, but I did get one barrel Necromantic for like 40, and then I got one for $10. So it was always that kind of deal like that. So I did wait and sometimes get lucky on that kind of stuff like that. But now a lot of that stuff's been re-released, so it doesn't really hold that that allure to it anymore. But yeah, Nick from Flanders. I simply must check out Audition. I recently saw a good movie that was said to draw some inspiration from this classic. I've only watched a handful of Sasquatch/Bigfoot flicks. Somehow Boggy Creek is not among them. Shame on me, I know. I hear this Charles B. Pierce film is the best out there. It must be very least be better than Edward Sanchez's Exist. Jikes, that was painful watch. I hate Exist. Questions. Do you think Sasquatch aka Bigfoot might be based on an yet unknown animal? Probably not. I mean, I think that it was probably just like a caveman or something that's translated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, or giant. Somebody saw a fucking bear or monkey or something, or ape. Bigfoot's not out there, guys. There's no bones. There's no fucking bones. Unless you find a giant Bigfoot graveyard like they do with elephants, but I just don't buy it. But would you feel exploited if a tragedy happened to your town and it got turned into a movie, The Town That Dreaded Sundown style? I don't know. I didn't really have to experience it. Like, maybe not Toledo, but if like Point Place, the small little like suburb of Toledo, did, I might feel a little iffy about it. It depends how they played people. It depends how they said. You know, it's all what they said and how they did it. You know, maybe if I lived in Snowtown in Australia, I wouldn't be happy. Who the fuck knows? 3. Which Blu-ray you ordered recently are you looking forward to receiving the most? Which one? Oh, the Day of the Dead 4K that I've ordered. I can't wait for that to come. It should be coming soon. Till next show, God willing, after scorching sun, now we're getting hit with thunder, lightning, and hail. Mother Nature at the worst or the end times. No idea. Papa Jupe, great name. Watching Old Shatterhand now on YouTube, not in English, great so far. I know Lex Baxter from as Tarzan. Never heard of these films. Thanks. Yeah, I had not really heard about these as well. Lex Baxter was new for me when I saw the Dr. Mabuse movies, and now he's popping up in all these movies at CCC. Very cool stuff. David Sandino, you should hold up the movie while you're talking about it for visual medium goodness. I like to do, I showed up a little bit, but I like showing the video clips of it. I think that's just a little bit better, so you get a closer look, and he gives me a heart, thank you. KNJHor.com, never heard of Fungicide. Thanks for the heads up, like usual, no problem. Stephen LeBlanc, Old Shatterhand was remade for German TV in 2016 as Winnetou and Old Shatterhand. Winnetou was played by Nick, I can't say that name, and I won't, a striking Albanian actor who worked a lot in Germany. They forced him to do a full body shave, which is genetically valid, but this case unfortunate. Pierre Price played the original Winnetou, and the clothing and wig made their look strikingly similar. Old Shatterhand was generally unknown in the U.S., but extremely popular in Germany. Bryce played the character in 11 films. P.S. I am looking forward to seeing Obsession. Magical realism was one of my favorite story structures. I was slightly aware of Siege. I have just ordered it. Thanks for the recommendation. Yeah, Siege is great stuff. Way Up to gives me a thumbs up. Thank you. Ken Coakley, I watched Never So Few after buying it on Fandango a month or so ago. I had it on DVD or Blu-ray as part of the Steve McQueen box set. I'm a huge Steve McQueen fan and tried to get as many of his films as possible. Frank Sinatra got back into acting after being blackballed from Hollywood, as was touched upon The Godfather. For my money, The Manchurian Candidate was one of his top films. Never So Few came out in 1959. A year later, in 1960, John Sturges worked again with Bronson and McQueen in The Magnificent Seven, and again in 1963 with The Great Escape. Sturges also directed the very important film Bad Day at Black Rock, which despite its title is not a Western. Heard only great things about that one. McQueen and Sinatra were both offered the title role in Dirty Harry. McQueen turned it down a lot of iconic roles, including Butch Cassidy to Paul Newman's Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy to Sundance Kid. Newman took over the Butch Cassidy role, and Robert Redford took over the Sundance role. McQueen and Newman did work together in 1974, the Irwin Allen disaster film The Towering Inferno. Of course, they fought over who got billed first. The scenes they were together showed that they had chemistry together. The cast in Never So Few was truly amazing. John Hoyt, who played Colonel Reed, also played the rich old curmudgeon who financed the building of the rocket ship in When Worlds Collide. He also played the ship's doctor on the Enterprise in a pilot episode of Star Trek. Dean Jones, who played Sergeant Jim Norby, was a mainstay in Walt Disney's stable of actors. He also played a crooked disc jockey in Elvis' film Jailhouse Rock. Paul Henreid, who played Nico Regis, is famous for playing anti-Nazi resistance leader Victor Laszlo in Casablanca. He was part of my favorite when he and the house band drowned out the Nazi singing with Les Misérables. Henreid was also in Exorcist 2, The Heretic. How do you say that? La Misérables. I'm sure it's the word I hate French. Seeing it spelled, I can never say it. Richard Johnson was the last actor to decline an offer to play James Bond before Sean Connery got the gig. Johnson did some spy films in Italy, and he looked like he would have nailed it as 007. Brian Donlevy did a lot of westerns, especially with Audie Murphy. Peter Lawford was a fellow member of the Rat Pack with Sinatra. Of course, I forgot he was in that. They were pioneers as celebrities endorsing politicians, and they helped to get JFK elected president. Peter Lawford and Sinatra starred in the original Ocean's 11, which in my opinion was much better than the remake. Gina Lola Brigada was a big star back then. She, like Sophie Loren, was from Italy and made a big splash in the U.S. The film Never So Few was pretty edgy. Sinatra telling the Z Chinese communists to go to hell was pretty extreme. Words like damn and hell weren't allowed in films until 1968. Charles Bronson's racist diatribes weren't allowed yet either. Ronnie Pajoja, Patoja, audition is legendary. My Gatewood film to the Mika years verse. Yeah, I mean, great. I think mine would have been, it had to be Ichi the Killer. So let's hop into the update. First up, I do wait for some things to go on sale and be cheaper. I got Bringing Out the Dead on 4K, Martin Scorsese, starring Nicolas Cage, John Goodman, Tom Sizemore, Ving Rhames. I think Patricia Arquette is in this bad boy as well. Great movie, most underrated Martin Scorsese movie that I've seen, I think. Love it. Can't wait to watch that one again. And then we got one here, the Wind of, I can't even see what they're trying to spell him. What is this? Ayahuasca. which I have trouble saying that. I couldn't read it there either. But this says it's from 83, but I think it's from 82 actually. But this has, I guess, a fantasy element, so I picked it up. Maybe it's horror-oriented. But yeah, I'm interested in this one nonetheless. But yeah, that is the update, and I'm out of here, guys. As always, have a good one.